Transformers and video games haven't always gone together as well as you might think. Sure, we had some pretty good ones, most of the High Moon games and that one Platinum one was pretty good, but more often than not, slapping the Transformers IP on a video game engine just didn't equal a good game. At least not for a good few years. We had to sit through some real stinkers before Transformers video games got any good. There was that old Beast Wars one that wasn't very good, and that Famicom one that everyone talks about, and that Japanese one that no one talks about.
Let me handle this. Take this.
That was about it. But then, in 2004, a game came along that changed the landscape of Transformers games forever. And it was called Transformers. Obviously. So, let's talk about the premise of the game. I don't want to go into too much detail about the background of the game and its developments, things like that. I don't think it's really important to appreciate the game and how good it is, but I do want to cover the basics just so you can see what the developer, Melbourne House, did with what they were given. So this game was actually based on the Transformers Armada anime, an anime that had actually wrapped up the previous year, but whatever. The cartoon followed the familiar hallmarks of Autobots and Decepticons and their whole war shtick. But the twist on the story this time was the introduction of Minicons, tiny robots that when attached to the larger Transformers would boost their power and give them new weapons to kill each other with. It was a big thing in the toy line.
New Transformers Armada with power-linking Minicon warriors. Unlock new weapons, new attacks in the fight between good and evil.
And these Minicons were wildly collectible. I must have had hundreds in my collection before I learned the value of money and sold them all. But it was this gotta catch 'em all mentality that Melbourne House went all in on. They took the concept of power-enhancing collectible mini-robots, boiled it down to collectible power-ups, and then took that idea as far as they could, building onto it systems of balance and strategy until they had a game that sat right on the edge of being both wonderfully complex and so simple I could play it. Right, should we actually have a look at the game now? The first thing to talk about when it comes to the gameplay in Transformers is that it's open world. The game consists of 9 highly detailed, very explorable open world maps. You start each level picking which Autobot you want to play as from a choice of 3. You got the leader, Optimus Prime.
Ready for duty.
You got the medic, Red Alert.
Red Alert. Ready for duty.
And the speedy yellow Kid Appeal character, Hotshot.
Hotshot. Ready for duty.
What are you doing? We don't need you anymore. Get. Once you've picked your robot and their Minicon loadout, more on that in a second, select a level and which bit of the level you want to jump to, and you're off. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that some of these levels are pretty impressive for the time. Remember, this is PlayStation 2. Some of these environments are still incredible today, at least to my old man eyes. With Melbourne House's proprietary engine handling everything from this dense foliage to the lighting system that made every level look and feel completely different. Oh, and once you're in the level, no load times. You just pick your toys, load the level, go play. I love this. Even when you finish the main campaign, you will be coming back to these levels a lot because, well, let's talk about the Minicons. So, as I covered at the top, in the show, Minicons give the Transformers power boosts, unlocking new weapon features in the Transformers characters. When specific teams of Minicons, usually about 3, were collected together, they could actually be combined into even bigger, sillier weapons. Melbourne House took this concept to its only logical video gamey conclusion, with the Minicons serving as the game's upgrade system, even finding a way to get the Minicons to synergize when used in combination. Now, despite being characters in the game, the Minicons don't actually have any lines or anything after you find them. You don't even see them again outside of the Minicon selection menu. It's so bold-faced and uncomplicated about the Minicon's role in this game. I love it. Apart from saving money on scripting and voice acting or whatever, they're just upgrades, you know? Like, that's all they need to be. There is some story about the Minicons leaving Cybertron and crash landing on Earth, and now that's why the Transformers are here looking for them, but beyond that, they just have one job, and like, that's fine. Hidden within each of these vast levels is a varying number of Minicons for you to find by exploring every tiny corner of these maps. Now, if you're struck by the idea that this sounds like a glorified Easter egg hunt, well, shut up. You're not wrong, But shut up. Each Minicon you find and equip adds additional functionality to your robot. Like in the show, some serve as new guns, some give you access to shields for added protection, some make you invisible or allow you to grab enemies with like a tractor beam thing and like swing them around and chuck them around the map. It's great fun. My favourite was a Minicon named Watchdog who would fire limpet mines at enemies which sort of stick to them and then they'd run around screaming and then just explode. That one was great fun. And without going through the entire list, there are some real novelty ones in there that completely change up your gameplay. Whoever you are and however you play, you will have a favourite. But pick carefully, because you're only allowed to bring 4 Minicons on each outing. And this is where it gets strategic, because not only can you only pick 4 out of the 40 Minicons you can collect to take with you, but each Minicon has its own power draw on your Transformer, meaning you have to be extra selective and not just pick all the best ones because your Transformer isn't going to be able to handle it. And on top of this, every Minicon in the game belongs to a colour group. Red, blue, green, purple and gold, I think. And how this functions is that if you pick multiple Minicons from the same colour group, they will actually give you a buff to your overall health, adding a layer of extra protection for picking your team more selectively. A little tricky if not all of your favourites are in the same colour group, but with the trade-off being that you'll last longer in a fight, and you decide if that's worth it. And that's the point! You decide how you want to approach these levels. It's not the most in-depth system out there, but for a game about action figures, they could just as easily have not done any of this. And this is obviously where Transformers keeps ramping up its gameplay. Each level builds on the last, changing up the rules and giving you fresh challenges and tools to deal with them. I shall elaborate. The first level is whatever. Amazon jungle, you drive around, you get to grips with the basics, shoot Decepticons, find Minicons, all good. Basic tutorial level. The second level is the Antarctic. A little bit different. Straight off the bat, you have limited visibility. You'll spot Decepticons easily enough, but by that point, they'll already be right on top of you. Luckily, there's a Minicon around here that will grant you Energon vision, giving you a slight advantage in the field, which you're going to need, because if these new probe droid enemies spot you before you spot them, then they're going to call in a dropship full of soldiers, and they are going to f*** your shit up. This is the only level where this happens, by the way, and every level is like this, with some unique mechanic that isn't in any of the other levels. One of the later levels is an island full of Decepticon bunkers that are like full of enemies and you can go inside them and start these like survival challenge things. Where did that come from? The deep Amazon level has these like cloaking enemies that hide in the trees in the rainforest and jump out at you, and I've just realised that's Predator, isn't it? That's a reference to Predator. It's been like 20 years, I'm still learning things about this game. And the game constantly and gracefully escalates these threats with each new level, changing up your approach in a subtle but deliberate way with each new environment. Every level is completely different, and combined with your choice of Minicons, can be approached in completely different ways. There's like one level where you have to fight your way through Starscream's spaceship that's like hanging over the edge of a cliff. That's like one level, right? But then you fight Starscream in a cutscene and the ship falls into the ice canyon below. And now you have to climb your way out of the same ship, but this time it's completely vertical. It's this really mind-bending and very clever way to sort of turn one level into two, even if the second half is just an annoying platforming level, but hey. But I said earlier that you'd be revisiting these levels a lot, so let me explain why. This is the first level in the game. This is the Amazon. And about halfway through the level, you're going to see this little glow up on this platform here, telling you there's a Minicon up there for you to collect. But try as you might, you are not going to find your way up there to collect it. Carry on with the level, get through the main campaign, probably forget all about it. Then, at about 3 levels later, you're hopping around the mid-Atlantic when you come across this little guy. This is Slipstream, a Minicon that will grant your Transformer the ability to glide. You can see where I'm going with this. With Slipstream acquired and equipped, you can now revisit that Amazon level, find the highest spot in it, and glide your way to that Minicon. And so, okay, you've got a glider now. So you're going to be going back to all those levels and having another snoop around for any Minicons you might have missed. Except, problem, it's a glider. Which means in order to get the best out of it, you're going to have to make your way to the highest point on each map, glide, most likely crash, and then have to repeat the process over again. In the initial levels, this might not be a problem, might even be a bit of fun, but in later levels where elevation comes at a premium, you're going to need a better strategy. So what are we going to do? Well, at some point in the game, you're going to come across another Minicon, and this one is called Full Speed, and he looks a lot like Slipstream. Huh. Full Speed grants your Transformer the ability to do a dash, good for evading enemies and whatever, but Combined with Slipstream, it actually allows you to gain altitude and make even better use of that glide ability, extending your range and your height and whatever. It makes you do the thing better. So now your upgrades are functioning as upgrades for your other upgrades. On top of everything else, now your Minicons are acting as modifiers for your other Minicons. And suddenly, at 2/3 into your playthrough, your exploration experience just got even better. More options, more strategies, more ways to play the game. You are however many hours into the game and your gameplay possibilities just keep expanding. Every time you master a new Minicon or weapon, the game throws you another one and you want to learn how to use it because you know it's going to change the way the whole game plays. The Vulcans from Star Trek have a saying, infinite possibilities in infinite combinations. That's what this game is. A bag of toys dumped into a bag of environments with like a bag of modifiers sort of dumped on top and stuff, and then they all sort of come together and then game. Right, I'm getting a little bit excited, so I'm gonna slow things down for a second. This game was the reason I bought a PlayStation 2. This and San Andreas, but mostly this. And I just want to share with you a moment from the very first time I played this game and what immediately endeared it to me. You see, at the end of the first level, the Autobots discover their 3 Minicon partners. These are a little bit different in that they actually follow you around the map, unlike the other Minicons in the game. They also give you this cool bullet time effect when you combine with them, but it wasn't very good, no one ever really used it. And they help out in firefights with little guns. But it's the beginning of the second level that you get your first proper introduction to them.
Jolt will accompany you as your partner in the field. You can power link with Jolt, giving you enhanced combat capabilities for a limited time. Be careful, he will absorb your energon when he is combined with you.
Now, I want you to think back to where you might have been on May 11th, 2004 when this game was released. I want you to think that wherever you were, half a world away in a small town in England, 13-year-old me had just taken his first steps into this new Transformers game and was about to laugh so hard his would fall off. It's the way he just runs back for more. Does it for me. I did this like over and over for about half an hour while my best friend sat next to me, not finding it anywhere near as funny. I don't know, man. I didn't sign up for this slapstick bullshit. So yeah, there's probably a good time to talk about the unnecessarily good physics engine they use in this game. It's a little weighty and makes the Transformers a little bit hard to control sometimes, but I forgot where I was, so I'm just going to talk about Transformers for a bit. So obviously, Transformers on the PlayStation 2 was a good game. I think I made that perfectly clear. We're all on the same page. But is it a good Transformers game? Well, sort of. Not really. And this is where I have to sort of touch on the negatives about the game. The game's plenty of fun, and it's obviously been a Transformers game since the start and not repurposed from some other game, at least as far as I know. But if you reskinned it, slapped a different IP on there, like G.I. Joe, turned the Minicons into weapon attachments, you'd have a perfectly functional non-Transformers game. And that's because the only thing that makes it a Transformers game, the transforming, isn't implemented very well. I mean, you can do it. You can transform wherever you like, however often you like, and sometimes it does come in handy when you need to do a run-up or clear out a group of enemies, but the game never really explicitly tells you that you need to utilize your alternate vehicle form to do anything in particular. There's no point where you find you really have to transform apart from maybe to clear a couple of tricky gaps, but even then, with the right Minicons, you don't even need to do that. You can use your car mode to drive into enemies to quickly clear out groups, but with the physics engine and the weight of every enemy in the game, you just sort of end up losing all of your momentum halfway into the run, and then you just get killed because you got nowhere to go. Hell, the driving is unwieldy at times, being really hard to control and taking so much getting used to. Most of the time, you'll end up stuck or needing to make a sharp turn, and well, you'll just find yourself transforming back into your robot mode and just hiking it because it's easier than trying to turn around as a car. So you end up growing out of the vehicle mode almost, with the Minicons serving sometimes as just even better modes of transport, like why drive when you can fly? It's a bit of a toss-up between either being given no real reason to ever transform, or being given the freedom to do it whenever you like, you just never really want to do it. It's either an abundance of freedom or a lack of dedication to the idea, and given the effort that's gone into the rest of the game, I'm inclined to say it's the former, with Melbourne House electing not to railroad you into using it, but in so doing, not really doing anything with it. If you want a really good example of well-implemented vehicle modes, I'd say look at the Revenge of the Fallen game, where you could use your vehicle mode to sort of charge into attacks and stuff. It wasn't much, but it's more than you have here. You can do some fun stuff. You can drive and then use the momentum to like launch into a glide, but there's no real point in the game where you need to do this. I only found out you could do this because I was messing around. But so what about the characters? Do they at least do the Transformers themselves right? Yes and no. The Autobots are given a handful of lines across the entire campaign, none of which tell you anything about the character. If you didn't already know them from the show, or couldn't figure out what their archetype is just by looking at them, you'd really have no idea they even have personalities. And I think this is fine. I don't honestly believe it's important to the game and isn't really necessary for the story. It would have been nice, but what character-driven stuff are you really going to do with, like, Meathead, Speedster, and, Robocop? On the other hand, you got that Japanese one, that Transformers Call of the Future that I mentioned earlier. I had to play a little bit of that just to get some of the footage, and I'm not joking. From starting a new game to actually getting to play it, there is no less than 11 straight minutes of cutscenes, a bunch of which is just like this budget Star Wars opening crawl rubbish, and then just awful dialogue.
The mysterious flying object is an unidentified body that suddenly appeared along with a space-time warp signature.
Okay. Alright, let's play some of this then. Oh my god.
This must be where the message originated.
It's been like 10 minutes.
Mission completed. Returning to base.
Why is it taking so long to start talking? As if this wasn't laborious enough. Yeah, I don't blame you.
Wait!
We must hurry back.
Shut up.
Autobots, roll out.
Right. Do this. Oh my god, what? What?
What is this?
No, you don't have to explain invisible in walls. It's a video game. Come on. Okay. Yeah, there is something to be said for less is more when it comes to plot. Meanwhile, this Transformers game fully embraces the straightforwardness of its story. You might think that a lack of story sounds like a bad thing, but a game without a story is still a game, you know? Overall, I will say the voice acting isn't great in this game. It's great hearing Gary Chalk and David Kay back as Optimus and Megatron, but some of the lines are just a bit, there's this one bit where the Autobots capture Starscream, and the dialogue they're given is just sinister.
Hack his warp transponder.
Yes, sir.
I actually used to think that Red Alert was played by Tim Russ, the guy who does Tuvok in Star Trek, but it turns out it's Darren Norris, who played Knockout in Transformers Prime. He was also in Team America, but I'm not showing any of that here. But yeah, apart from that, I don't really think the story is missing anything. So whatever, the Autobots drive around beating up the bad guys, that's what heroes do. What about the Decepticons? They don't have any more lines than the Autobots, especially Tidal Wave, he doesn't really say anything, but bear with me here. They don't need them. Each Decepticon functions as a boss battle, and each one, like the levels they're in, are different. While most of it just amounts to like shoot at them to death, each of the main villains fights differently and have different attacks and approaches to watch out for. I mean, this is just video game boss stuff. Most of their attacks taking full advantage of the ragdoll effects in this game. For example, after making your way to the very top of this ancient temple, this helicopter guy called Cyclonus will attack you, and one of the first things he will do is grab you and swing you round and 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 round before launching you into the sky all the way back down to the ground before chasing after you as a helicopter. Guy likes the high ground, I guess. Starscream will do bombing runs on you before closing in with his sword attacks, and in the rematch a few levels later he actually tries to fly an entire spaceship into you and misses. Tidal Wave's a little bit different. In the first half of his level you might not even know that this aircraft carrier destroyer thing is even a transformer until it damn well stands up, which is awesome, by the way. At which point he'll just pound you with missiles and projectiles, and most of his level is just spent running away from him. And then there's Megatron, who spends the entire match bullying you. Turns into a tank, right? So naturally you're going to be running away from him, shooting at you and whatever, but I swear to God, that is nothing compared to what happens if he actually gets a hold of you. I don't know what it is about this game and making you watch yourself get the crap kicked out of you, but it really relishes it. And oh, and if it's not that, it's this. Like, these guys are brutal, and well, do you see now why I don't really care if they have lines or not? I mean, talk about action speaking louder than words. Oh, and the boss fight music? There is one thing, one Transformers-y thing that this game does really well. One thing that you could really only do in a Transformers game. One thing. And it's Unicron. Get it? Unicron, one thing. Yes, so Unicron is in the game, and naturally, Melbourne House went all in on the idea. For those of you who don't know, Unicron is like the Transformers devil, traveling around devouring planets, which is totally unlike any other cosmic evils you might have heard of from any other franchise. And like in the various TV shows, including the Transformers Armada anime, he is coming for Cybertron. So you remember how I said that every level brings new ideas and feels completely different and forces you to play differently? In this level, the whole book gets thrown out, and instead of driving around punching baddies with your car mode in the Amazon rainforest, you are flying around Cybertron with a super flight-capable, proper flying jetpack, and have to stop the planet-devouring himself by blasting him in his mouth hole before he can eat Cybertron to death. There was no need for this, and they did it anyway. I can't clap because of the sort of virtual reality nature of my setup. I'd just be sort of smashing my controllers together. But if I could, I'd be clapping right now. This level is such a sincere token of the developers' appreciation for the fiction. They had to put Unicron in this game, even though he doesn't really fit, and he just sort of appears, and there's some nonsense about the Minicons like coming together to help you fight him or something, but it doesn't really work, and it's pretty clear they just kind of crammed him in there because there was a toy coming out that year of him, but whatever. It's not very satisfying, but it doesn't matter. It's really, really, really good. And technically, it is stunning. Melbourne House went out of their way to create a simulation where Cybertron could be populated with more or less buildings depending on your distance to the planet, creating this sense of scale and realism that completely falls apart if you get too close, but whatever, they still did it. And okay, so he doesn't transform into robot mode like in the shows and in the movie, but what the hell would that even look like? That would be ridiculous. Actually, now that I think about it, they could have done a level where you just sort of like go inside him and like shoot his heart or something, or like a Mass Effect style thing where they just kind of talk him to death.
It's not over yet. You can still redeem yourself.
Thank you.
But I guess that's what this whole game really comes down to, keeping it simple. And so this is where I have to go off script, not because I'm particularly daring or exciting or very good with words on my own, but just because Starfield came out and I kind of stopped writing the script at this point. And I suppose I should be wrapping it up here. It's been about 20 minutes, so that's probably long enough to ramble about a dead Transformers game. Why I think Transformers on the PlayStation 2 succeeds is because it embraces simplicity. Where I think another developer would have tried to like shoehorn in a story or reskin another IP to fit into a Transformers game, Melbourne House elected to just keep it simple, allowing them to focus on the main pillars of the game, the visuals, the gameplay, and the Transformers. And when I say simple, I don't mean the game itself is simple, but the approach to it was no nonsense, maybe a little safe, but ultimately solid. It's colourful, it plays well, at a solid 60, I might add, despite all the chaos, and it's just a lot of fun. as games should be. Transformers is a fantastic example of the kind of open world sandbox gameplay that I don't think we really see much of nowadays, not without it being overburdened with like collectibles and distractions and whatever, I mean, which are nice and everything, but there is something about the way that Transformers builds up all of these mechanics and ideas and then just sort of lets you loose on them to do whatever you want. It's one of those games where once you get to grips with it, you find yourself asking those silly questions you would as a kid, like, you know, can I get up there? I wonder if I can do this. What happens if I do that? The physics, the Minicons, the open world, and all the different enemy types all come together to allow you to basically f*** around effectively. It really fires up your imagination, makes you ask things like, hey, that's a cool dropship, can I get inside that? And yeah, you can. You don't have to, and it doesn't really do a whole lot for you most of the time, but it's something you can do and you'll have a blast doing it, and as soon as you're done, you're going to be wondering what you can do next. There's like tons of other things as well that I haven't even had time to cover. Apparently all the cutscenes were worked on by like the guys who did the Final Fantasy games, well, the cutscenes for the Final Fantasy games, but like, yeah, they were here. And there are these Datacons that you can collect in the game that unlock all this like bonus material, like music and comics, concept art, these old 80s PSAs apparently as well that were never aired or something. And I just want to remind you, this is PlayStation 2, this is 2004, and the developers were working within the confines of an existing IP. Given all of that, Melbourne House should be commended for their job turning that cartoon into a video game that's honestly still just as enjoyable 20 years on, and it should really not be overlooked when considering the PlayStation 2's greatest game. If you can get a copy, somehow, I don't care how, do it, okay? That's an order. Right, that's enough. Let's round off with a montage.
Let's rock!
Right, well that was a bit different, wasn't it? No Beat Saber, no VR shenanigans, at least not like the usual sort. But yeah, I love this game, I still do. It's one of those rare things that is as good as you remember it. And this was a lot of fun to make. I will be trying to do more of this stuff in the future. Did you play this game growing up? And if you did, do you have any fond memories of it that you share in the comments? So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, well, it is YouTube, so if you want to hit one of those buttons down there, the like button, the dislike button if you really want, or the subscribe button would be a good one, or don't hit any of those buttons, just get on with your life, forget I even exist, I don't care, not your dad, and I will see you next time. Right.